Another shining star on the Laurel Canyon scene just a few years later will be singer-songwriter Jackson Browne, who is, are you getting as bored with this as I am, the product of a career military family. Browne's father was assigned to post-war reconstruction work in Germany, which very likely means that he was in the employ of the OSS, precursor to the CIA. As many of you may recall, U.S. involvement in post-war Reconstruction Germany largely consisted of maintaining as much of the Nazi infrastructure as possible while shielding war criminals from capture and prosecution. Against that backdrop, Jackson Browne was born in a military hospital in Heidelberg, Germany. Some 2 decades later, he emerged as... never mind. Let us talk instead about 3 other Laurel Canyon vocalists who will rise to dizzying heights of fame and fortune. Jerry Buckley, Dan Peek, and Dewey Bunnell. Individually, these names are probably unknown to virtually all viewers, but collectively, as the band America. The 3 will score huge hits in the early 70s with such songs as Ventura Highway, A Horse with No Name, and the Wizard of Oz themed The Tin Man. I guess I probably don't need to add here that all 3 of these lads were products of the military intelligence community. Buckley's dad was the commander of the now defunct West Ruislip USAF base near London, England, a facility deeply immersed in the intelligence operations. Bunnell's and Peek's fathers were both career Air Force officers serving under Buckley's dad at West Ruislip, which is where the 3 boys first met. We could also, I suppose, discuss Mike Nesmith of the Monkees and Corey Wells of 3 Dog Night, 2 more hugely successful Laurel Canyon bands, who both arrived in LA not long after serving time with the U.S. Air Force. Nesmith also inherited a family fortune estimated at $25 million, that's in those back then dollars. Graham Parsons, who will briefly replace David Crosby in The Byrds before confronting the Flying Burrito Brothers, was the son of Major Cecil Ingram, quote, Coon Dog Connor II, a decorated military officer and bomber pilot who reportedly flew over 50 combat missions. Parsons was also an heir on his mother's side to the formidable Snively family fortune, said to be the wealthiest family in the exclusive enclave of Winter Haven, Florida. The Snively family was the proud owner of Snively Groves Incorporated, which reportedly owned as much as 1/3 of all the citrus groves in the state of Florida. And so it goes as one scrolls through the roster of Laurel Canyon superstars. What one finds, far more often than not, are the sons and daughters of the military intelligence complex and the sons and daughters of extreme wealth and privilege. Oftentimes, you'll find both rolled into one convenient package. Every once in a while, you will also stumble across a former child actor, like Brandon DeWild, or monkey Mickey Dolenz, or eccentric prodigy Van Dyke Parks. You might also encounter some formal mental patients, such as James Taylor, who spent time in 2 different mental institutions in Massachusetts before hitting the Laurel Canyon scene. Or Larry Wildman Fisher, who was institutionalized repeatedly during his teen years, once for attacking his mother with a knife, an act that was gleefully mocked by Zappa on the cover of Fisher's first album. And finally, you might find the offspring of an organized crime figure like Warren Zevon, the son of William Stumpy Zevon, a lieutenant for infamous LA crime lord Mickey Cohen. All these folks gathered nearly simultaneously along the narrow, winding roads of Laurel Canyon. They came from across the country, although the Washington, D.C. area was noticeably overrepresented, as well as from Canada and England, and, in at least one case, all the way from Nazi Germany. Interestingly enough, they came at a time when there was no music industry in Los Angeles. They came even though, at the time, there was no live music scene to speak of. They came even though, in retrospect, there was no discernible reason for them to do so. It would, of course, make sense these days for an aspiring musician to venture out to Los Angeles, but in those days, the center of the music universe were Nashville, Memphis, and New York. It wasn't the industry that drew the Laurel Canyon crowd, but rather the Laurel Canyon crowd that transformed Los Angeles into the epicenter of the music industry. To what then do we attribute this unprecedented gathering of future musical superstars in the hills above Los Angeles? What was it that inspired them all to head out west? Perhaps Neil Young said it best when he told an interviewer that he couldn't really say why he headed out to LA circa 1966. He and others, quote, were just going like lemmings.